film, it's a lot thicker, right? Different type of material, so it takes a ton of heat. So I recommend using something like the Fusion heat guns that blows a lot of air. You can use the Wagners; those work too. There's a lot slower; they don't blow as much air out, so it takes a little bit longer. So your time is money, right? So if I can save 15%, 20% of the time shrinking because I'm using a little bit more powerful heat gun, I mean, I may do that. So again, this is liner out right now. It will have to be flipped over if we're going to install this piece. This stuff is awesome because while it is more difficult to shrink, you don't have to have it perfectly flat and flawless like you would another film. The adhesive on this is extremely aggressive. So what that means is if I have little fingers that normally I couldn't push out on the inside of a window, the adhesive is so strong that there can be areas that you can just force out with a little bit of heat on the surface of it, or just by pushing on there in general, and that adhesive bites onto this glass really, really well. I always try to keep extra film even on the sides too. So, again, if I was doing this whole windshield, I kind of pre-cut the bottom a little bit to get close to the shape. If you can remove the wipers, that's going to make your life a lot easier. You can, if you put them in service mode and flip them up, because sometimes like these ones here, they just blowed up here, you couldn't actually lift them up. So I just took them off. But you want to make sure you give yourself as much area to work with as possible. And we want to keep it as clean as possible too. So I've pulled off the moldings that were on the side here to give us more access out to the edge of the glass. I recommend doing that if you can, if you're comfortable doing that, pull those back. The idea of this film is we want to protect as much of the glass surface as possible. So you want to make sure you have a roll big enough to actually reach past the top and past the bottom. A lot of vehicles, you probably want to go with a 48-inch roll, because a 36-inch roll, like we measured this one out, and it's 36 from the dead center here to about the top here. And when you factor in curve, there's no extra material to work with either, so you kind of come up short on the sides. So that being said, a lot of vehicles you're going to want a 48-inch for. Some of the trucks and SUVs, you can go down even to a 24. Like we offer pre-cut pieces for like the Jeeps, the flat windshields on some of the Wranglers and the Gladiators. If there's no shrink necessary, we can pre-cut a piece and it will fit pretty much edge to edge, just a little bit inside edge to edge. But that's pretty much it, because you're going to want to have a lot of extra material to shrink. So we're not going to pre-cut windows for any regular car, because you want to have as much excess as possible. And then our ultimate goal, like I said, is to get it edge to edge. So I like to trim my final cut after I install. So I'll have excess kind of all the way around still after I install it. Then I go back and just ride the edge of the knife on the edge of the glass on an angle, so you kind of cut over the top of the surface, not straight down the side, because any little bit hanging over the edge, I don't know if you guys do PPF as well, or window film, any excess hanging over is going to lift up. It's going to create a lift spot, right? So we want to get this thing down nice and tight, and it's going to seal a lot better to the edge if it's just shy of the edge itself. If you have a piece, say you've got a massive windshield, and you come up short a little bit on the bottom, again, some people are okay with that as long as it's below, front impact coming over the hood. You may be able to get away with the bottom not being covered, but you always want to make sure that the bottom edge of the film is below the wipers, the lowest point of where the wipers sit. At minimum, it's not all the way to the edge itself. Because the last thing you want is to have the wipers picking at the edge all the time every time they wipe. And also, this is a very sharp edge. It's going to start chewing up the edge of your windshield wiper too. So you don't want to create any unnecessary chatter as it bounces up every time it goes over the top of this film. All right, so one thing I like to do is use a Sharpie to kind of mark out areas if I want to cut. So this one here, I've kind of just cut a random rectangle here. A little bit of excess on here. If I was going to kind of cut the edges some, I don't like cutting on the car right now, so I will kind of Sharpie out my edge, kind of lift up the film and cut a little excess off of there. Sharpie on the liner is not going to hurt anything. You're going to peel the liner off anyways, right? So we can draw all kinds of happy faces and smiles and talk about how good we did and everything if you want on there with our Sharpie later, but I'm just going to kind of trace down the edge just a little bit here. This is a very thick film, so be cautious when you're using your knife, right? Because it kind of wants to walk through the film a little bit. It isn't cut nice and smooth like some regular films would. And again, that's my edge here. I do want to leave a little excess outside of that. The reason I say that is, again, most windows are wider at the bottom, skinnier at the top. When I install this, I'm probably going to have to slide this down a little bit to kind of make up for a little bit of the trimming I do at the bottom. So if I'm exact edge to edge right now, as soon as I slide down, I'm gonna be short across edge to edge or the top as I bring it down. So, anyways, so again, leave yourself a little extra as you work. I try to keep at least a couple inches extra over top of the roof if I'm doing the full edge to edge. And when I shrink it, I'm not gonna stop shrinking right around the edge here. I'm actually gonna shrink over top of the roof. It's gonna help pull it tighter down around this edge. This film needs a lot of heat to get it down. So I wanna have extra so I can kind of shrink over top of the roof a little bit. Plus when I slide down a half inch or so, I have excess that's already shrank. It's gonna match the shape of the roof.